Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Cheryl's Kitchen. My name is Charlie Nyer, and I'm the host, writer, and producer of this. Please note all my subjects deal with dark periods in history, quite often with a lot of violence and pain, so your discretion is advised. I thought I would carry on this week and talk some more about Stalin, not so much about what he was like during World War II or thereafter, but let's ask some questions and answer them. So I'll just want to go through Stalin as a wartime leader. Was he ruthless? Absolutely. Was he unfeeling? I think so. Was he iron-fisted? Yes. He did, however, bring the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics into the 20th century, kicking and screaming, especially Russia. He made it an industrial nation. Now, whether he did it by hook or crook, only history can tell you that. He moved the industries east of the Ural Mountains during World War II, and where they could be untouched by German or Axis bombers. One thing I think that needs to be brought forward is there's a principle of war called the selection and maintenance of the aim. And I think Stalin's aim was to kick the Germans out of Russia and the Soviet Union and inflict as much punishment on them as he could. In that, he was steadfast. So here are some quotes from Stalin, supposedly from Stalin. The death of one man is a tragedy, the death of millions is a statistic. Another quote, quantity has a quality all its own. In this, he is right. You know, you can have the best tank in the world, and if you have 100 of them, they're not going to be any good against 1,000 of a slightly inferior tank, because eventually you will lose them all. So what was Stalin? Was he cunning? Absolutely. And you can see this in the way he appointed people to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union when he was the general secretary. And he appointed the people that were loyal to him. And this way, it was easier for him to get power when Lenin passed away. Was he ruthless? Without a doubt. He ruthlessly purged the Communist Party and the Red Army in the 30s. Was he a bully? According to history, yes, especially with the people in his inner circle. He often at parties would not drink. He would deliberately pick on someone to see what would happen. Did he have an inferiority complex? Well, possibly. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I really don't know. But Leon Trotsky thought he sure did. Was he sociopathic? I don't know, but I suspect he may have been. He certainly wasn't empathetic at all. Was he insane? Again, I can't clinically say yes or no, because again, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm going to hazard a guess he wasn't. Was he a murderer? Hell, yes. In his early days, he robbed banks to fund the Communist Party. His policies resulted in the deaths of millions of people. The Soviet Union, just for a factoid here, lost over 30 million people in the Great Patriotic War, and that's what we call World War II. He expanded the Gulag. He had two of his NKVD chiefs executed, and they were loyal to him. He lost his last chief of the NKVD, Lavent. His last name was Beria. Look him up. He's an interesting character. He was discovered to be a serial rapist. Was he a man of his times? Yes, he was. Hitler, Mussolini, Tito, Franco, and Tojo were all, I wouldn't say peers, but they were all there at the same time. They were all ruthless dictators, and none of them should ever get a free pass. So in the 1930s, fascism and communism were a thing. Lots of people brought into both sides of the argument. Fascism and communism are responsible for the war deaths in excess of 50 million people in the 20th century, and I might be underestimating that. Not to mention the internal deaths and displacements. Yet, there are some people in this world who continue to say that fascism or communism is the only form of government that works. Was he paranoid? Yes, he was. He even admitted it himself. All ruthless dictators are paranoid, and there's this for very good reasons. Either some of your people are willing to kill you, just get rid of you, or your loyal minions think they can do a better job. Was he responsible for the Holodomor? In other words, the Ukrainian starvation in 1932, 1933? Yes, he was. Whether it was deliberate or not is a question for the historians. His policies towards the kulaks and the policy of selling grain to foreign interests instead of feeding the people ensured their starvation. Estimates vary, but anywhere from 2 million to 8 million people starved to death. So his death in 1933 is a particularly interesting time. Apparently, what happened on about the 1st of March 1953, he and some fellow party honchos were having a social gathering that ended at 4 a.m. That would be 4 a.m. on the 2nd of March. He then left word with his guards that he was not to be disturbed until they heard him moving. Well, the day came and went, and they hadn't heard anything, and the day came and went, and they still hadn't heard anything, and they were afraid to go in to see if Uncle Joe was okay. They contacted various party people who had no idea what to do. Do we call the doctors? Do we, go in and see what he does? And eventually, his housekeeper decided she was going to go in, and she found him along with all the party brass that were there. He was lying on the floor. He was incontinent, lying in his own filth. Apparently, he had suffered a stroke. Now, this was not a dignified death by any means. His death isn't the real story. What the real story is the huge delay, either by incompetence, maybe it was deliberate incompetence, in seeking competent medical authority. Now, going back to Lenin's death, there were a number of doctors involved with his treatment. And it was offered that foreign doctors be brought in because they were better, and it was absolutely refused. How dare you use a foreign doctor to treat the leader? Our doctors are very good. Well, it's a known fact that Russian doctors, or Soviet doctors, let's say, were not as good as North American or British doctors, European, because of the system that they went through. So that's some stuff about Stalin. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed this thing. If you do, please leave me a thumbs up and leave a comment. And I'll be trying to figure out what kind of ending I'm going to give it. So I think I'm going to stick with this one. Don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. That's it for another edition of Cheryl's Kitchen.